Hey, welcome into the Husker247 HoopsCast. The season has officially started. Nebraska is 1-0. And what better time for us to dive into the weekly conversation about Nebraska basketball that we will have all season long. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson. Both of us were at the game yesterday. Brian in an official capacity, me sitting on, I don't even know what section we're in, like 116 or whatever.
Ooh, 116. Look at you. Fancy.
Yeah. Well, we moved down a few years ago. We started in 302 and made our way all the way down to the 100 level a few years ago. It was worth it. It's been good. All right, Brian, where do we want to go with last night's performance? Nebraska gets to win over the University of Texas, Rio Valley Grande. Yeah, whatever. Rio Grande Valley. I don't know how it works.
Texas Rio Grande Valley.
There we go.
It's UTRGV to you.
Yeah, yep. It was quite the acronym up on the scoreboard yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
where to start? It was a little bit of a tense opener. I mean, it was 69-65 with 5 minutes left. I wouldn't say I was discouraged by it, even though that was the case. It was interesting. Last week, Fred Hoiberg was talking about this team, and I don't know, coaches always, build up whoever they're playing. They want to get their team thinking like this is basically like a Michigan State type challenge walking into your gym. You better be ready. But you could tell he was genuinely worried because he mentioned it like 3 or 4 times in media gatherings that this squad had hit 25 3-pointers in an exhibition, would basically shoot it from the parking lot. All 5 guys on the floor were not afraid to let it go behind the arc. Their coach is a first-year guy who had been in the BYU program under Mark Pope last year, which was really, an explosive offense from deep. And so I think there was a worry about sort of you get caught up against a team that is going to just try to trade threes for twos. And if they hit enough of them, you could find yourself in a tussle. And they hit 13 from behind the arc, and Nebraska ultimately hit 6, and a few of those didn't come till late. And so because of that, Nebraska was sort of getting what they wanted on the offensive end, but it was like they'd get up, 8 or 10, then UTRGV would hit 2 threes, and suddenly you're like, okay, it's a game again. So it was kind of one of those tricky openers where you just have to see if your team has sort of the mettle to withstand like being put in that situation. And I think that was the positive, was you saw in the last 5 minutes the response from the main guys who I think are going to be the top 5 or 6 players on this roster. And they stepped up and they just put it away. And, Nebraska wins going away 87-67. Connor Essegian, I think, hitting 7 points in a row and hitting that big 3. I think that's big for him, a sort of who's in case on this roster, who can step into that a little bit. And he had some big shots yesterday, ended up with 13 points. So that was a good debut for him. Andrew Morgan, I thought, was solid in his minutes with 10 points. So there is some encouraging things, and those are going to be some stuff on film where they know they got to get a lot better.
Yeah, they also defended Nebraska like all the way. Basically, as soon as you were crossing half court, they were in their man defense and they were up. Like they weren't sitting back and just allowing Nebraska to jack 3-pointers, which then resulted in a lot of driving and a lot of play at the basket for the Huskers, which is a good opportunity for Bryce Williams, who showed that he can get to the hoop. He's still their best offensive option. He was the leading scorer, I believe, for Nebraska yesterday, and he played quite well. The other thing that showed, Brian, and obviously, this is a non-conference game. We'll see what it looks like in the Big Ten. Raleigh Wooster not afraid to get into the paint and get to the basket. I mean, he finished 6 of 7. He only took one real outside shot. He knocked down a 3-pointer, which is sort of one of the shortcomings of his game. But he did a nice job getting to the hoop and then finishing around the hoop. And so that's good to see. I mean, so if a team decides they're going to play in your shorts out there and try to take away the 3-pointer, it's nice that Nebraska can attack and get inside. And you mentioned Andrew Morgan. I sent you a text at one point early in the first half. It just felt like they could feed him, and he was going to back guys down and go get easy baskets. This is the sort of game that, you know, you expect Nebraska to be able to play in a couple different styles and for guys to play well. And I thought all three of those played pretty well on Monday night.
Yeah, Morgan played 20 minutes, had 10 points. He had 7 points. Like when you texted me, that was like 3 minutes into his action.
Yeah.
He had 3 really nice low post moves. And I just liked how fluid he looked when he got the ball in his hands. You didn't feel like it was going to be a catastrophe or a turnover upcoming or anything like that. He just looked comfortable. And so I thought it was a good debut by him. He was a guy I was like, I want to see more of him, sort of like after I got the first glimpse of him. And you have to remember too, he had been in concussion protocol and just got cleared basically that morning. So that was pretty impressive from that end. And I thought Worcester, you know, was the steady hand you hoped he would be. The thing I think people who hadn't seen this team yet probably pick up on is like he's a really big guard, you know, like I mean he's going to give you some rebounds too. He ended up with 18 points but also 9 boards, 4 steals. He's diving on the floor. So I think he was probably in the beginning stages of endearing himself to this fan base, just sort of the way he plays. You know, there's some concern points. Nebraska wasn't great at the free throw line aside from Bryce Williams. He was 10 of 11, but they were 25 of 35 as a team.
Yep.
And Braxton Mia, you know, got to the line, but it looks like it's a struggle for him there. So you worry about that being a liability if you can't, you know, pick that up. So, you know, I think you saw though that, you know, Bryce is ready to pick up where he left off. Raleigh is going to give him a steadier hand than they've had at point guard in a while, like a true point guard. And Andrew Morgan is, you know, a player I think can really develop into a strong offensive weapon with some of his low post stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if we were going to kind of harp on things that stood out, you know, Fred Hoiberg hates seeing that 26 number in the turnovers category too. I mean, that is a lot of turnovers for Nebraska in that game. And I mean, you just had.
Well, I had him at 13.
Yeah. For some reason, it shows 26 in the. Okay. Here's what I did wrong.
They did struggle up. Go ahead.
I looked at the wrong category. I looked at points off of turnovers.
Oh,
yeah. 26 seems really high. They had a stretch where they kept turning the ball over, though.
No, it brings us into a fair point. I think they had like 8 or 9, like 10 minutes into the game. Like the first part was sloppy. And I think Raleigh was kind of settling into the game too. Like he had a way better last 30 minutes of this game than first 10. Like the first 10 were a little disjointed. Yeah, but yeah, there's definitely some turnover possessions they just gave away early that they're not going to like. That stands whatever the number is. I thought they did better on the glass in the second half. That was a big emphasis at halftime. Hoiberg noted, I think that UTRGV, it's really throwing me off with their name. You got to like look at it every time and think about it. Had 6 offensive rebounds and 15 second chance points because of that. They'd get some, you know, they'd heave up another 3 and make it because they'd get that extra possession. And he said to his guys, if you close that down, we can run away with this game. They sort of did. They got up 15 points like 6 minutes into the second half. The disappointing part was they let them edge back into it there, where it did get a little nervous. Like you needed someone to hit a big shot to make everyone feel like, all right, it's in hand. And Asijan did that. And that's a positive though, Schaefer. I think it did come to that moment where Asijan, who had a tough year last year at Wisconsin, had to hit a big shot for Nebraska to sort of close the door. And then he kind of went on a little run like Casey did sometimes last year. He had 7 points in like 40 seconds. And that was sort of that. So that's got to be a nice confidence booster for him for an opener in a new uniform.
Was there anyone, and you've obviously been to practices a little bit, and so you're more familiar than most. Was there anyone that kind of caught you by surprise with how they performed, either in a good way or a bad way, in the opening night? And again, one night, one data point. We don't want to make too much of any of it.
Yeah. I'm interested where it goes with Berke. Like he seems like he is somebody who can do a lot of different things, and it's not necessarily going to be a scorer for this team. But I don't want to also like act like the book is out on that because I think Hoiberg mentioned him and getting him more involved in the post game. There's ways he thinks they can do that. He only shot it
Four
4
times.
times, made 3 of them, finished with 6 points. He had a plus minus of 21, plus 21, so it was one of the better plus minuses on the team. And he does, he got 6 rebounds and he gets some things done, sort of that dirty work, but I'm just curious how that role kind of gets defined because he can fit in a lot of different spots and sort of how he works with the different lineups. That's going to be really an interesting thing to watch to me. I was neither good nor bad is on him, but I just don't know where it goes. I'm curious.
Yeah, he has.
Braxton,
Oh, I was gonna say real quickly on Berke, he has like a unique build. Like he just looks a little bit different than whatever I expected him to look like. He's just a
is he
little
more
more barrel
stout?
chested, and
Wow.
he's he's thick, I guess, without being like
Yeah.
fat. I don't really know how else to explain it. You hear he's a wing, and you have your idea of what a wing looks like. And this guy walks in, he's like just broad shouldered, barrel chested. Like he looks like he should be 3 inches taller and a power forward. Like he's kind of got the power forward body, but he's a wing. Does this
Yeah.
make sense? Am I explaining this well?
Yeah, it does make sense. He's a little more stout to me than I thought he was gonna be, or
I agree.
he looks like he could, like, go over to the ice box and, like, fight in the USHL,
He
like,
looks like an enforcer. That's a good
yeah,
way to. He looks like a defensive. In hockey, he looks like a defensive line player and an enforcer,
yeah, and
which
that's
I
a
don't mind.
compliment. As
Yeah.
as some as someone who covered the Stars, that's a compliment from me. He looks like the guy who, like, a minute into the second period, he just drops the gloves because he wants to fight somebody,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that's his personality, just, like, his build, like, he could
Mhm.
so yes, we took an interesting description of Berke there, but um,
It's what people listen for, really.
yeah, he does look a little different than I probably envisioned him, but yeah, I'm curious where it goes with him. Braxton, it was probably not like the best debut, like he only played 10 minutes, 0-2, 0-3 at the free throw line. I think the first free throw like he almost banked in. So that worries you a little bit. It's just a small sample, but like he could get to the line a lot, but it only matters if you can make them. So hopefully that's something that improves a little bit. So it wasn't maybe his best outing. Gavin Griffiths, I think, can play better than probably he did offensively. He was 2 of 5, 0 of 3 from deep. So mainly we're judging it because he missed a few shots. He hit some of those in the exhibition. So you're hoping that goes down. I think that's what people are wondering. Last year's team had that ability in this analytics game of college basketball where you like to be able to cancel teams out because you can hit threes. They had that in their bag. And that's what people wonder about this squad. Can they build that up as part of the arsenal where Connor Sejan can give you 3 of those a game and then Gavin Griffiths can give you 2 or 3 and you end up getting to 9 or 10 makes behind the arc? That's something I wonder about with this particular team going forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair thing to wonder about. Going back to Braxton Mia, I am really fascinated like what the limit of his playing time is going to be because I don't. He's not a guy that's probably going to get into the 20-25 minute range a whole lot. So then it's how are you choosing to deploy him, and then you bring in Andrew Morgan for a stretch, and you're going to kind of like use both of those guys to sort of have your big. And there's going to be times where Berke is going to be the biggest player on the court or we saw that last night. They had a lineup where he was the kind of the nominal 5. I'm really sort of curious how that all works together. And then do you end up sacrificing anything on the offense and defensive glass? I mean, if you have Worcester grabbing 9 rebounds a game, which I don't know is going to happen in Big Ten play, then you're probably going to be okay. But you also want to see Braxton Mia and Andrew Morgan and those guys end up with some more rebounds than really what they pulled in.
Yeah, that's definitely going to have to be what they bring to the table. Juwan Gary ended up with 9 points, plus 26 when he was out there. So if you're into the plus minus thing, he was the best on Nebraska's team. So, the first week can be a little treacherous. I was watching scores as Nebraska was playing, and all of these teams ended up pulling away, but like Purdue was like in a dogfight for a while, with a similar type school. It was like a 3-point game with, 10 minutes, 15 minutes left. It ended up being 17. Iowa was kind of in a battle with Holy Cross until about 15 minutes. Wisconsin was, I guess, maybe with Holy Cross, Iowa with another team. But all these teams sort of had a tussle for a little while. And it can be a little dangerous. I think some of these schools you don't know as much about. And if they hit enough threes like this particular team did, it can make it a little dicey for a bit. So I think Hoiberg thinks the team they played is going to be better than people realize. We'll see. But I can see where he's getting at with that.
Yeah, well, and then, if you're in Nebraska, you just have to figure out what it is that's going to work. You get to the free throw line. They had a stretch there. I think they were 10 of 17 at one point, and then they had a stretch where they really knocked down quite a few free throws in a row. And so, they're capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to look as bad as it did early on. I am kind of do you think that's the lineup that we're going to see most of non-conference season, or do you think he's going to experiment a little bit in terms of what the starting five is? Because that's with you have Morgan and Season coming off with a bench there with Berke and Braxton Mia joining Juwan Gary, Worcester, and Bryce Williams as your starters.
I don't think it's settled yet. He started Gary, Berke, Braxton, Bryce, and Raleigh. Feels like Andrew Morgan could pop in there. Asijan could pop in there, or else Asijan's a 6th guy. Asijan's going to play a lot, though. They need him to. They need to feed that guy, and he needs to be hot. He needs to have a great year. It's going to be huge. Yeah. Sam's going to play more. He played 12 minutes. He was coming off that injury, so I think he'll be more involved.
Yeah. I just curious on the 2 returning. Well, there's 3 returning guys, but Hoiberg's just playing a little bit right now, and he, as you said, will get more involved as we go forward. Your thoughts on Bryce Williams, what you saw on Monday, and then Juwan Gary too. Your just kind of initial thoughts on where both of those guys are as sort of the returning players and what you assume the veteran leadership of this team to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain with Bryce when he had 27. He had 19 in the first half to keep Nebraska ahead, 42-36. I thought he took what was there in the offense. It didn't feel like he was forcing it at all. And just a controlled game. Gary, too. Gary had a couple threes where he wanted to test it out, and he missed a couple. I think he was 1 of 4 from deep. But those guys, they're your backbone. Those guys in Raleigh, I think. Raleigh's going to be part of that, like that big 3, I feel like. Just to have played a lot of college basketball, who you're really counting on. Bryce, that's a good first night, though. He finished last year playing just great basketball when you look at his numbers the last 3 postseason games. And so to go out and put 27 up the first night and have it be just a smooth, he didn't race to it at the end. He was on his way to maybe 35 at one point, it felt like. So that's what makes you feel good, is that you've got that guy in your back pocket, because he's got an ability, I think, where he's going to be able to get to the rim and show off more of his scoring ability we even saw last year throughout most of the regular season. But he also is a guy who's satisfied to not have 27. Like, I feel like he's a player who doesn't mind if he has a game where he has 10 to 12 and does it, over here or over there, and other guys get their points. And so that's always a good thing when you've got a guy with a mindset like that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's bring it back, Brian. Okay. Excuse me. We're gonna guess a random Husker hooper, as we did all of last year. I've got one dialed up for you. We're going to go to the early 2000s to slightly mid 2000s. I know this isn't your strong point, but I told you before, I feel like I've got some hints that'll help out here. We'll start with this one. This player walked on to Nebraska. So this was not a scholarship guy. To walk on, he redshirted. His redshirt year would have been 2001 to 2002. Believe he made the honor roll all 4 or 5 years that he was with the team. So that'll help out. This player comes from Fairfield, Nebraska.
Geez Louise. Fairfield. Give me another clue.
All right. So he comes from Fairfield, Nebraska. Made the honor roll all those times that I mentioned. The bulk of his playing time came in 2004, 2005, and 2006. He is now in the community of Lincoln and is a dentist.
Oh.
You got it?
Yeah. Bronson Schleep.
Bronson Schleep it is. That's correct.
The name, I had like 5 names like kind of in my head that were like colliding. They're punching each other. Dentist. I knew that. I had heard that. Who knew? It wasn't the native son clue that I should have been able to use to get it. It was the dentist clue.
Yeah, I figured the dentist clue was going to be the one that kind of pushed it over the top. That's why I wasn't too concerned about you kind of having to work through it a little bit.
I'm not good at that game, and so I don't want people to get mad at me because I've followed Husker basketball since I was a kid. I'm better at. I need to throw every other week, like throw a game at you where a random like game situation like this happened and with 3.2 seconds. That's like my brain processes more is like these particular games and how they finish. Or when like Ryan Anderson sang the national anthem before the Kansas game, that was a 44-8 game or whatever, like stuff like that for whatever reason pops into my head quicker.
I will. I'll work on that going forward. I'll try to paint more of a vivid picture. It's a little bit hard because I don't remember any of Bronson Schleep's 4 career starts off the top of my head.
Yeah, that wouldn't help me in this case.
Like I said, I felt confident. I felt confident that we were going to get you there in one of the early clues. So Bronson Schleep, this week's random Husker Hooper. Who's it going to be next week? Well, you'll have
to my choice
and find out. We'll have all the coverage. We'll go back to you. We'll just go back and forth. Okay. We'll just go back and forth all year long, unless one of us forgets, so the other one has to look somebody up, which may or may not happen. Nebraska plays again Saturday. They have Bethune-Cookman Saturday night. If you have nothing going on, get to the Pinnacle Bank Arena. Get yourself some Nebraska basketball early non-conference season action. I don't believe it'll be available on BTN, given that it's a Saturday. I'm guessing they're not preempting a football game so they can televise Bethune-Cookman Nebraska basketball, but maybe.
Probably not.
I'm guessing it'll be BTN Plus. So. And then they have Farley. I think it's Farley, not Fairley, or is it Fairley? Do you know?
Fairley.
Is it Fairley Dickinson? Fairley Dickinson next week, and then they're
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. We'll get into it pretty quickly. I'm excited. I'll be up at that one, covering that for us, and so we'll know what Nebraska is. I think real quick by that game. So that'll be, and then right after it, you get Creighton. So it doesn't get a whole lot easier after that.
Creighton plays this very team Nebraska played tomorrow on Wednesday, so you can score compare.
Yeah, we can transpose. So transitive property. So if Creighton doesn't win by 20, Nebraska will beat Creighton. That is what we're going to take away from this. Now, if they win by more than 20, we'll just assume it's a random outlier statistically, and it doesn't have any bearing on future results. So. As always, check out everything we got for you at Husker247. Of course, we have all the basketball coverage that you could want and need. We also have football, recruiting, all of that and more. Husker247. For Brian Christopherson, I am Mike Schaefer. We will catch you next time.